this is part 6, oral interview with Cheri Beal Adams. It is September 24th, and it is 1:45 Sunday. Okay, we were talking about the social and political upheavals in the country at that time, in the late 60s and early 70s. One of the things you had mentioned was with a lot of the young guys being drafted right out of high school at 18 going to Vietnam. You had mentioned, yeah, they were old enough, they were still kids, but they were old enough to be drafted and go off to a war and fight and die. And you were talking about the way the parents felt about this.
Yeah.
So by 1968, you are now junior in high school. So a lot of this is coming to the forefront. Also in 68, when Walter Cronkite said, basically, you can't win in Vietnam, and Lyndon Johnson's famous quote, "If I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost Middle America," he decides not to run.
Right.
So you have a presidential election of a guy who, last time he tried in 1960, then said he's out of politics, Richard Nixon,
Right.
and Herbert Humphrey. Both of them were kind of war hawks, cold area warriors also. What was the attitude of the young people in the country at that time?
Well, it was kind of split. It all depended on where your household stood. You know, if your family or your parents were political, you know, there was a side. If you as a kid were paying attention, there may be two sides in the household, and in 1968 there was in our household. Dad was more supportive of being there to help the Vietnamese people. And it wasn't just the Vietnamese, there was also Cambodia involved, and the Khmer Rouge had come into, or were in Cambodia, and they were just slaughtering Catholics. And that was a big thing for Dad. So he was all about, you know, the war, and because, you know, I had friends who were going to be drafted, and we had already lost Billy Murphy. I was anti-war. I didn't see the point in it. You know, I had been studying Asian civilization and realized that these countries over there have been fighting this type of war for centuries, thousands of years. I mean, it's just what they did over there, and we really had no business being there. We were trying to change millennia of behavior and beliefs, and we had no clue.
But it's interesting, though. World War II was over. We wanted the world to be peaceful. We wanted to end war. We wanted to end Holocaust, and the UN was set up for that. What made Vietnam different than our fighting World War II to stop?
We saw it on TV every night.
But what made it different? The goals, the philosophy. I know seeing it on TV every night changed everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
But what was difference? What was the difference in the philosophy from World War II?
But the United States had not been attacked.
Yeah.
First of all, we went to Vietnam as advisors, and it just grew from there. Vietnam was never considered the Vietnam War. It was a Vietnam conflict, just like Korea was a conflict.
No, Korea was a police action. They get better at naming them.
Well, whatever. What I'm saying is that, yeah, it wasn't an official war.
Well, the West believed in the Truman Doctrine of containing communism, and that was one of the other reasons, I guess. But here at home,
I'll tell you, Bill.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows?
I know.
Because it was a mess. You know, you've got kids my age, and you know you're dating somebody, and you know their birthday comes along, and that's it. They have to sign for selective service. And then, every year the draft comes up. And the summer of my junior year, I was dating Cheri. And, God, I had loved that kid since I was 12 years old. He was my first heartthrob. And we finally started dating in high school. And he decided, he didn't even talk to me about it, but he decided it would be a good idea to go in the service. He didn't want to go to college, but he wanted to go in the service. And he decided that the Army was the place for him. And so he went and he signed up and told me about it afterwards. And his reasoning was, if I sign up, I get to pick. If I get drafted, they're going to send me to wherever. And then because, once the guys got in, they didn't want to be in there forever. So they gave them the incentive of, if you volunteer for Vietnam, you'll get out 18 months early. Well, if you live that long.
Yeah, Russian roulette.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a 2-week, timeline from the time you hit the shores of Vietnam to the time you died. So, yeah, I didn't see that was a good thing, and I actually went down to his recruiter and tried to get him out. I pitched such a fit. I was so mad at Joe.
Did it work? No.
No.
Okay.
But that recruiter saw me on a weekly basis. I mean, I would walk through the door, he would roll his eyes, he'd throw up his hands, he'd say, and what now? What has the government done to you now? And I'd say, not the government, you. You did. Yeah, I was not his favorite person.
Oh, all right. Anyways, so we're coming into the summer of '68 presidential elections, and a number of things happened that year.
Okay.
First of all, there was the Martin Luther King assassination.
Yeah.
Which caused.
Yep. Ooh.
That was the fuse that.
That was the fuse that lit the bomb. I mean, it was
The direct action of civil rights, because Martin Luther King was all about peaceful protest.
Right.
Would you say that his assassination in '68 is when the radical wing of the civil rights, like the Black Panthers, the Weathermen, were being taken more seriously?
In hindsight, I would say absolutely. Living it, not so much. I mean, we had the Boston Globe, and the Boston Globe, a very good newspaper, and they had real journalists, and they were doing, serious reporting, but we're only getting that particular point of view.
Well, the Globe had been Democratic since its inception. You also had the American Record.
The Herald, Boston Herald.
Boston Herald and the American Record. Those were slanted more towards the right-wing Republicans. We got both papers in the house, I remember that.
I think we got the Herald in the morning and the Globe in the morning and the
Herald in the evening.
Yeah. I can't remember. All I know is that Tommy Rogers was our paper
boy, yeah.
And we saw him twice a day.
Yep.
And he got a tip per paper, so.
Yeah. So anyways, so Martin Luther King's been assassinated. Did that affect anybody in your generation, even with your friends, as far as civil rights and beliefs?
No. There were 2 black families in a town of like 35,000.
Yeah.
It was mighty right.
Okay.
So no, we had the Diggs family, and he was sort of active. Mr. Diggs was active in town politics. Really nice guy, smart man, and Daddy knew him. And then they had the Mayo family, and Vinnie Mayo was kind of an odd, shy kid. Of course, again, looking back in hindsight, being the only black kid in an all-white school.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure that we realized that he was black. He was just the goofy kid.
Yeah.
So color had nothing to do with it. It's just that he was a really goofy kid. So
My experience being a high school teacher, a lot of goofy. Now, contrast the assassination of Martin Luther King with the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy in '68 in LA.
Bobby Kennedy's assassination really affected me because I really had hoped to see Bobby Kennedy become president. I liked his politics. I liked the fact that he was very much he was very much about taking care of the Native American population and trying to keep their lands from being stripped from them. And he was also an ecologist. So I liked his way of thinking.
But in an earlier interview, when we were talking about the Kennedy family, when we were talking about Denise and her attitude about Teddy Kennedy, you had mentioned all the Kennedy brothers were unfaithful to their wives.
Oh, man horse.
And they were ruthless.
Yeah.
The whole family. And you didn't like that, but yet you were willing to vote for him? Because he also wanted to get us out of Vietnam.
Right.
So that's the reason why?
I would say, there were things about him. I mean, we had, a couple of choices.
Yeah.
And, when he got up and he spoke, he was very inclusive as to the people of the United States. Everybody in the United States.
Do you think that was more out of political expediency?
Nope.
You actually think he believed it?
He was very passionate. When he would speak about certain, factions or whatever, he was very, very passionate. And, to say that the Kennedy men were man horses. They were. They were horrible to their women, and they were all about having 10,000 kids, but they were off doing their own thing. It was all for politics, and they were Catholic. So and their wives were Catholic. So there was no birth control. They went about doing what they did. But the politics, I mean, Joe Kennedy, the father of all of these children, these boys, he wanted his son to be president. He didn't care which son. He didn't care if all of them were. But one of them, at the very least, was going to be president. And he did whatever he had to do to make sure that happened.
Well, actually, Joe Kennedy had aspirations of being president himself, but he blew that when he came back came home on leave from being ambassador to England and said England's lost the war. FDR just froze him out.
Yeah.
And he destroyed his political chances. But yeah, you're right. One of his sons was supposed to be.
Yeah. He wanted to have the first Irish Catholic president.
Yeah. Now, so you're the end of your high school career, you're getting ready to go to college and stuff. 1968 elections, with RFK assassinated, you then have...
That was heartbreaking. It really was.
Well, you then come up to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
Oh my God. What a horror show.
Now, first of all, Chicago 7, Abbie Hoffman. My opinion of Abbie Hoffman is he was just a charlatan and a rabble-rouser. But that's, from my perspective, after studying that era as a historian, I now, and you have often said you weren't there, you don't understand. Right. Okay. In '68, the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, they were the organizers of a lot of this. They were all about disruption, and they were, communist front group. What happened at the Democratic National Convention that made the young people go against the Democratic Party? What was it?
Really, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I wish I had some really, lovely excuse for whatever happened. You had kids that they just wanted to raise hell. And then you had people that had strong political beliefs. and you had adults that were influencing these kids that had their own agenda. There was a lot going on during that period of time. So as to who started what and where and when and who said the thing that started everything, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I remember seeing it on the news and thinking, this is not going well.
You think?
This is not going well. And then, of course, because of that, the SDS, which was in all of the colleges, including mine, which was Boston State Teachers College. Why, Dad? Did I seem like I was a teacher? It just, losing almost an entire semester because the SDS people thought it was a good idea to call in bomb threats every day. I mean, I think I paid $200 a semester, which was a lot of money back then. And, in my mind, I would say, all right, so at $200 a semester times how many, divided by how many classes, each class was worth X amount of dollars. And if I wasn't able to attend those, the price got more expensive as we went along, to the point where, I think I finally attended maybe 4 classes and had to get that whole semester in. So I was pissed. Well, not only that, but, I'm driving into Boston every day. I have to pay for parking and then get to the class and then find out, well, we're not having class. And then, is it going to clear in time to do the afternoon classes? And then realize, well, I have to go to work anyway. So, I paid for parking. I've had the gas. It cost a lot of money that year to go to school.
Do you think they made any converts by being that disruptive?
I have no idea. Listen, I was a working student.
Yeah.
And I was just pissed. I wanted to get an education. I just needed to get through that year. Daddy had just passed away. It's not like I was in my right mind or anything.
Yeah.
I was worried about you and Nisi. I was so afraid for Mama, who definitely was not in her right mind. So it was a very, very hard time for me, because when Daddy died, all my dreams died with him.
Yeah. No, we're talking about 1971 now. 71.
Daddy died January 26, 1971.
Yeah. So we're talking about 1971. You graduated from high school in 1970, but this student rebellion had been going on since 1968 in full force.
But it didn't have too much to do with us high school kids.
Yeah, no, but by the time you were going to college, it had matured into a, I don't want to say well-organized.
They were pretty well organized for a riffraff group.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, you just brought something up that I would like to get your opinion on now. Having lived through this when it started originally, this kind of social upheaval, with the riots of 2020, George Floyd, and then BLM, and then everything after that, and now it's a cancel culture. Do you see the similarities? Are there similarities?
Well, for my generation, this is just a continuation. We learn, you protest, things get done. Taking it to the streets, it gets things done. It doesn't, you're not always shown in the best light, but it gets things, action breeds action.
Okay.
To the George Floyd thing, that was flat out murder. There's no mistaking that. What they did was just murder, and they did it because he was a black man, and that's the culture in that area. Cops can be, and don't get me wrong, because I have the utmost respect for cops, because they run in when everybody else was running out. But I'll tell you, what those cops did, that was murder.
Okay.
They thought they were big, and they thought they were bad, and they thought that they could do whatever they wanted, and they committed murder. And I'm glad they got them for it.
All right. Now, we're at the RFK has been assassinated. Hubert Humphrey has been nominated for the Democratic candidate for president in 1968. Now,
He was a nice man, but he didn't have the balls to be president.
but on the other side, you had a Republican
Uh-huh.
who said he would never enter politics again after he lost the race for California governor in 62 by the name of Richard Nixon.
Boy,
Now, he did promise to get us out of Vietnam.
and
He got us out of Vietnam.
okay,
Granted, a number of B-52 strikes on Hanoi, bombing back to the Stone Age, as some people say, but it worked. That election was, if I remember correctly, it wasn't a landslide, but there was no way Humphrey was going to get it.
no way.
And it's like the 72 when it was 49 out of 50 states went for Nixon.
Right.
Looking back and with hindsight in your age and experience now, do you think America turned a corner and said enough of the riots, enough of the protesting, enough of the disrespect?
Well, here's what happens. When the protests first started, you had people who were actually believed in what they were doing. And then you start, marching down through time, and there's more rabble-rousing than there is actual beliefs. There are people who join groups just to join groups because they've got nothing else to do. I swear to God. They,
Destruction?
yeah, I mean, sometimes, to this day, I don't understand sometimes the things that are happening because what is the point? What is the point? And don't give me some pie in the sky bullshit. Just tell me, what is the actual point? What is your belief? Why are you doing this? And what is the result that you desire?
Mm.
But, I'm 71 years old. I wasn't thinking that way when I was in my 20s.
Well, it's actually still happening today with the young kids being influenced by older adults who will not get arrested, who will not suffer financially
Right.
for these bad decisions that they're making. All right, so we're now at the point where by 1970 an incident happens on a college campus in May, Kent State. Famous song, 4 Dead in Ohio.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a turning point?
It was. It was a huge turning point. And I'll tell you the reason why is because now you were afraid to protest on campus. Because now the governor's going to send in the National Guard. And what happened at Kent State was some guardsman who was scared to death was holding a loaded weapon and pulled the trigger. And he didn't do it on purpose. It was an
But
accident.
4 others died, though.
Well, once
Were they all loaded with guns? Were
Yeah.
they all had live ammo?
Yeah.
That was the mistake of the governor.
Yes. Yeah. It.
Do you think that divided the young people from the 30, 40, 50-year-olds in the
Yeah.
country at that time? So it made the divide even worse.
Much worse. Because, pretty much at that point was don't trust anybody over 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I got to be 30, I was like, what's so bad about being 30? I'm having the best time of my life in my 30s. And
Well, you know what's interesting? You're in the smack dab in the middle of the baby boom generation. I am at the tail end. The baby boomer cutoff, I think, is 62 or 63. And I was noticing stuff. By the time, I got into high school, the country didn't care. It was one of those things, we don't care what you do. Do your drugs, do whatever you want, drink, don't care. Don't protest, don't cause trouble. That was the attitude. Yeah, that's the attitude that I was feeling. You know?
Well, undoubtedly,
Yeah.
because we've gone through decades at that point of war and protests and killing all these young guys, sending these guys like they were like fodder.
Yeah.
You've got, we've got these boys going off to Vietnam, and you've got these young girls who have pinned all their hopes and dreams on their boyfriends because, back then, you did get married out of high school. That was sort of the thing. Or you went to college to get your MRS degree, your Mrs. degree. It was...
Okay, you need to explain that. The attitudes of women in education in college.
Yeah, there were many families who felt that, you found the cheapest college to send your daughter to so that she could find a husband who was going to have a good profession. I was in, Joe and I were a couple, and we actually thought about, getting married at some point, but that was not my goal in life. And I did not want to be a teacher, but that's what Dad had decided, I was going to be. So, yeah. Things changed.
Mhm.
Anyway, you've got the boys going away and not coming home, or coming home completely shattered. It was not a good time. And there's a lot of those boys who are now, men of my age, who are still completely shattered from the Vietnam War. It's a horrible thing.
So basically, we get out by 73. The world has literally turned, and we're still in the midst of a major Cold War. But it wasn't, the sense was nobody's going to shoot nuclear missiles. And it's you stay on your side of the line, we'll stay on ours.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a whole lot of James Bond stuff going on.
Yeah.
But, the general public was not involved in any of that stuff. It was all behind the scenes stuff, and it was, Russia and Cuba and China and, whatever all else was going on. And quite frankly, my generation didn't give a shit. We just wanted to get our educations, get our degrees, and then, go on and try to have a family and live back, kind of dancing between the expectations of a 50s family that you grew up in and the 60s where we're supposed to be socially relevant and, we want to take care of the planet. Yes, folks, even back then, we were trying. And just trying to make the world a better place. And because we were very, I think, idealistic back then. And we just kept trying. I mean, it was the hippie generation. We were trying to just make the world a better place, a kinder, gentler world. And of course, that never works out well, because there's always haters out there. There are people out there who hate just to hate. And
well, I agree with you in part, but I disagree with you. I don't think it's just to hate. I think it's more about power. They have no soul. They don't care who they hurt. They just want power. Now, do you think that's where our politicians have shifted to?
Well, let me tell you, at this point, it's 2023. I am so completely and utterly disgusted with our government right now. I could spit nails. And we have let, and it's our own fault, because we keep re-electing these old white men who are from that were born in the 50s or the 40s and have no relevance now. Just no relevance now.
Well, it's not just old white men. You have old white women in there still. You have Elizabeth Warren, Dianne Feinstein.
Elizabeth Warren is not that old.
She's 70-something.
Excuse me.
I know.
You know, you could be aged but not be old. And Elizabeth Warren is not an old woman. She's very relevant. You have Barbara Boxer, who, I mean, okay, she's older than God.
She retired.
And then you have, who's the other one? Dianne Feinstein?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time. But, you know, you've got all of these old people. I mean, they're literally standing in front of TV cameras and they can't remember their own damn name. It's time to go. It's like Strom Thurmond they were propping him up in a wheelchair. and you know, they would nudge him to say I. And he was, what, 99?
Yeah. Well, they just did that with Dianne Feinstein.
I mean, it's ridiculous. We need term limits. We desperately need term limits. We need age limits. And, you know, if they want to still be involved in, you know, then let them be advisors. But for God's sakes, this is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. The country is going to hell in a handbasket, Harry.
Okay, now that I've got your blood pressure up and you're ready to go take on the world again,
yeah.
1968.
Yep.
Let's switch over to something a little bit more common.
Good luck with that.
We'll try.
Okay.
Okay. You want to talk about marriage? No, let's not do that. That doesn't work.
Sure we can.
Okay.
Sure.
So, how many marriages?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I've had 2.
How many kids?
1.
Talk about your daughter.
Well, I'll talk about my marriage first.
Okay.
I was not what you call a serial dater. I mean, I dated somebody for a period of time. So there were a few young guys. Well, first of all, Cheri went to war, came home, and that was it. I didn't see him for years. That whole thing just blew up. I don't know. I still talk to him to this day, but that was just all very weird. He came back totally messed up. So then it was on to dating other people. I was proposed to 4 times. I accepted 3 times, and then ended up marrying my daughter's father, who turns out was a sociopath. So yeah,
that's putting it politely.
Yeah, it was not a good situation, and I ended up realizing 2 weeks after I was married that was probably a bad idea. But being the good Catholic girl that I was, in for a penny, in for a pound, and figured I'd work it out. Ended up going to the parish priest to say, what do I do? And he said, well, I'm just going to have to pray on it. And I decided then that I was done with the Catholic Church.